The Basilica di Santa Maria Maggiore rested in quiet. An unusual silence wrapped around its ancient stones. The funeral had ended. The last prayers whispered away. Pope Francis was not in the Vatican tombs. He lay here, between the Chapel Palatine and the Chapel Sforza. The Virgin Mary watched over him. He had loved her deeply. Outside, Rome's busy hum returned. Life moved on. But inside the basilica, a solemn hush remained. The scent of incense still hung heavy. It formed an invisible veil. It drifted over the old marble floor, pressed against the cold stone. A small shape trembled. It was a dog, not a grand animal for ceremonies, not her spoiled pet. He was an old dog. His fur was patchy, streaked with gray. His eyes held immense sadness. Even the few priests remaining felt it. His whole body spoke of loyalty, a silent, desperate loyalty. The day before, he had followed the funeral procession. He slipped past velvet ropes. He moved unseen between guards. He navigated the murmuring crowds. No one had the heart to stop him. They thought he would leave after the service, but he did not leave. He found the tomb, and he stayed. 12 times they tried to move him. Each effort failed. An old sacristan brought water. He poured it into a small terracotta bowl. A young nun offered bread. It was wrapped carefully in a napkin. The dog sniffed politely. He licked the water once. Then he turned back. He returned resolutely to his spot near the tomb. He curled up like a small, faithful guard. He refused to abandon his post. Time passed. The vast naves of the basilica emptied. The great bronze doors closed for the night, but the dog remained. He stayed in the holy, flickering light of the candles. He was still, unmoving, beside the one who had seen him differently, not as a stray, not as a nuisance, but as a soul worthy of love. The sun dipped low over Rome. Long golden rays slanted through high windows. Light danced on the aged marble. It rested on the simple tomb of Pope Francis. And there at its foot lay the dog, still faithful, still unwavering. Among the few staff left inside, word spread. They knew about the dog. A decision was made. The animal must be removed. The dignity of the place had to be preserved. A young priest approached. His eyes showed more compassion than severity. He hesitated. "Come, little one," he murmured. "It is time to go." He held out his hand. The dog lifted his head slowly. His eyes met the priest's. They were full of pain. Infinite sadness filled them. The priest gently tried to lift him. A low whimper escaped the dog. The sound was heavy with grief. It echoed like a silent prayer against the old walls. Later, 2 guards were called. They held a soft blanket between them. They tried to carry the dog carefully, but the animal did not resist in the usual way. He did not growl. He did not show his teeth. He simply went limp. His body felt heavy with sorrow. His paws instinctively pressed against the marble, as if trying to anchor himself there, as if the floor itself was the last link, the final connection for his faithful soul. They finally managed it. They carried him gently away from the tomb. They took him to one of the side chapels. The dog lay there for a few moments. He seemed dazed. He blinked in the golden light filtering through stained glass. Then, suddenly he rose. He stood on trembling legs. His head was low. He followed an invisible trail. He limped slowly back towards the tomb, back towards his friend, back towards his pope. An old canon watched from the shadows. He wiped his tear-filled eyes. He murmured softly, almost to himself, "Simico, let him be." His voice trembled slightly. There are no greater prayers than those he offers. That night, they stopped trying. The basilica stayed open later than usual. The great doors were not locked. The tomb was no longer guarded just by marble. A small, brave heart kept watch too. A heart refusing to betray love. Outside, a soft mist wrapped the city. The first candle flames began to flicker. They appeared on the pyres or before the basilica. A sign of silent respect. Respect for an act of loyalty. An act that would soon capture the heart of Rome. The news about the dog spread. It moved like wildfire through Rome's ancient, winding streets. A young sacristan couldn't hold back his emotion. He had whispered the story to a passing pilgrim. "There is a dog," he confided in a low voice. "He refuses to leave the Holy Father's tomb." An old woman knelt praying before the doors. She heard the story with reverence. She repeated it softly to the nun beside her. Tears shone in the nun's eyes. She, in turn, passed the story to an Irish bishop visiting the city. Like candle flames passed from hand to hand, the news traveled. It moved through the whole city, carried by whispers, tinged with wonder, touched by a shared sadness. In a small cafe 2 streets away, a barrister paused. He stopped wiping down tables. He told the story of the dog to a Spanish journalist. "He stays there day and night," the barrister said reverently. He glanced thoughtfully towards the basilica. "They tried to move him, but he always comes back." Meanwhile, the basilica bells chimed 9 times. Hundreds of people had gathered silently on the piazza. There were no protests, no shouts, no demands. Only silence. Only waiting. A collective pause. An inner pilgrimage of hearts. Those lucky enough to be inside the basilica watched quietly. They observed the small figure by the tomb. The dog barely moved. He curled even tighter against the cold stone. Beneath it rested his master. One of the oldest priests leaned heavily against a marble column. His eyes were clouded with tears. "He is doing what we all wish we could do," he murmured. His voice was broken. "But we are too proud, or perhaps too afraid." The words faded into the vast nave, but they resonated in the hearts of those present. Outside, the sea of candles grew. First 1 flame, then 2, then hundreds. They lined the steps. They bordered the doorways. Rome was lighting a vigil, not just for a pope, but for a love too pure for words. Families stood with strangers, old beside young, shoulder to shoulder. Their faces glowed in the flickering candlelight. Beneath the high vaults of Santa Maria Maggiore, the little dog kept watch, unwavering, silent, a living testament, proof of a loyalty that outlasted death itself. The night passed in quiet reverence. A light mist descended upon the city. It draped the cobblestones in a silvery veil. Shortly before dawn, a young deacon acted. He felt moved by a force he didn't understand. He opened one of the heavy side doors. Just for a moment, he thought. Just long enough to say a prayer, but fate had other plans. He hadn't anticipated the wave of people. They moved forward respectfully, entering the basilica. There were no hurried steps, no murmurs, just a silence filled with awe. They entered on tiptoe, as if approaching something far more sacred than marble or gold. Even the children, usually restless, stood still. Their eyes were wide, absorbing the majesty of the moment. They found him easily. Curled at the foot of the tomb, a patch of his scruffy fur rose and fell, following the rhythm of his slow breathing. The dog did not lift his head. He did not stir, but everyone there felt it. He sensed their presence, as if he could feel the love itself floating in the air. The first to kneel was an old woman. She held a worn rosary in her work-marked hands. She did not pray aloud. She simply bowed her head. Silent tears flowed down her cheeks. Then a small boy stepped forward. He wore a faded football jersey. He gently placed a single daisy near the dog. A touching gesture, the simple compassion of a child. A Sudanese refugee stood nearby. He was barefoot, trembling from cold and emotion. He murmured a prayer in his native language. His voice was barely a whisper. An Irish bishop removed his episcopal ring. He touched it for a moment to the marble tomb. Then he pressed his forehead against the cold stone, as if whispering all his prayers directly into it. They came one after another, not to worship the dog, but to honor what he represented. A love that needed no words. In the soft glow of the candles, the basilica transformed. It was no longer just a monument of power. It became a living heart, beating in unison with thousands of broken hearts, united for a moment. In the midst of silence and flickering light, the grand basilica mirrored humanity, finding true holiness in its shared vulnerability. The dog remained still, neither asleep nor fully awake. He simply existed, in that sacred space between life and memory, carried by a love without boundaries. The air grew thick with unspoken prayers. They rose like gentle mist between the tall columns. And so, in the silence of the basilica, a truth emerged, without trumpets, without official speeches, without grand homilies. The greatest sermons sometimes come from those who cannot speak. A testimony more powerful than any words, breathed out by a small, faithful heart, a heart that refused to forget. With the first light of morning, Rome began to stir. Narrow streets slowly filled with life. Street vendors set up their stalls. Bells from small churches rang out for early mass. But in front of the Basilica di Santa Maria Maggiore, a different kind of quiet reigned. Passers-by slowed their pace. They lowered their voices when they saw the candles. They noticed the silent assembly. Even their footsteps seemed softer, almost reverent as they passed the doors. Inside the basilica, a new life cautiously awakened. Workers began sweeping. Priests gently adjusted their vestments. Guides prepared for visitors. But everyone moved with unusual care, as if afraid to break the fragile atmosphere. Something had shifted. The air felt heavy with sacredness. Every movement held a slight hesitation. And always, the little dog remained, curled at the foot of the tomb, a small, scruffy patch of life, yet he held the hearts of thousands within his small being. His body was weak, his breathing shallow, but the determination to stay burned fiercely in his small frame. A group of cardinals gathered near the Sforza chapel. Their crimson robes made a vivid splash of color. Golden morning light streamed through the high windows. Their voices were low, hushed, but urgency laced their words. "He cannot stay here forever," one said, his brow furrowed with worry. "It is not proper," another nodded in agreement. "The basilica is a place of order, of tradition." But Cardinal Montini spoke. He was one of the oldest, a man who had known Pope Francis personally. He slowly shook his head. "And what is greater?" he asked. His voice was calm but firm. "What is greater than order, than tradition? Only love. A love that refuses to give up." A silence fell over the group. Beneath the layers of protocol and pride, they knew the truth. Today was not about rules. Today was about what the heart understood. Long before the mind could grasp it, the rector of the basilica, a quiet man with serious eyes, approached. With a simple nod, he gave the order. The simplest order: let him stay. For as long as he wishes. Outside, the crowd pressed against the iron gates. They had not come to demand or protest. They had come to pray, to mourn, to simply be present. Journalists from around the world mingled with the pilgrims, their cameras aimed at the grand portal. Headlines were already forming. "The dog who refuses to leave Pope Francis's tomb." Tears and emotion spread globally. Inside, beneath the venerable arches of Santa Maria Maggiore, the little dog stirred in his sleep. Perhaps he dreamed of warm hands stroking his fur, of a gentle voice that once called him amigo. His body was frail, his heart beat slowly, but he remained true to his mission. He had loved, and he stayed. The basilica bells chimed noon, not with a triumphant, joyful peal. They rang in slow, solemn tones. The sound shivered through the Roman air. The city listened, the city wept, because now everyone knew. Not from press conferences, not from official declarations, but from whispers carried on cobblestones. There is a dog. He refuses to leave Pope Francis's tomb. In every cafe, in every taxi, on every crowded piazza, the story was told, over and over. They tried to move him. He returned. They offered food, blankets, comfort. He chose simply to stay. He refused to leave the man who had never abandoned others. And so Rome, the eternal city, witnessed a small miracle. A loyalty so silent, yet so powerful. It transformed the walls of one of Christianity's holiest sites into a living prayer. A decision had to be made. The Vatican received official inquiries from journalists, from government bodies, from millions of ordinary people. They all asked the same question: what will happen to the dog? A council of high-ranking church officials met. Behind closed doors, the air in the room was heavy, thick with incense, weighted by the decision ahead. Some argued passionately for tradition. They cited the need to preserve the dignity of the holy site. Others felt something deeper. They saw the little dog as a living symbol, the very essence of their faith's teachings. But Cardinal Montini, the eldest among them, stood. He rose in the center of the room. His voice was tired but unwavering. It resonated through the chamber. "When history remembers this funeral," he said, "it will not remember our vestments. It will not remember our prayers. It will remember him." The decision was made. A simple commemorative plaque would be placed near the tomb. No grand monument, no elaborate ceremonies, just a few words etched in stone. To honor the faithful friend, the friend who showed the world that true love never ends. Below the words, an engraving. A small dog curled near a shepherd's staff, simple, profound. In the basilica, workers prepared for the quiet tribute. Their footsteps echoed softly between the high columns. They carefully chose the spot for the plaque. The dog paid little attention to the activity. He lifted his head once with effort, as if sensing the movement around him. Then he laid it back down with a soft sigh. History did not interest him. Monuments meant nothing to him. His mission was already complete. He had loved, and he had stayed. Outside, the ocean of candles continued to burn. People stood shoulder to shoulder. Some wept quietly, others prayed silently. Still others simply stood motionless, lost in contemplation. The air smelled of melting wax. A faint scent of roses lingered. There was no anger, no unrest, only deep, silent reverence, a humility that reached beyond the city walls. Cameras from around the globe focused on the basilica, but no one dared disturb the silence. News anchors spoke in hushed tones, describing what they saw: a small dog, an immense display of unconditional love. Often, their voices broke. The scene transcended words. Language felt inadequate. As the sun dipped towards the horizon, the sky above Rome filled with soft, golden light. It streamed through the basilica's high windows, bathing the marble in luminous warmth. Shadows danced on the floor, as if the city itself wanted to join this farewell. There, at the center of the light, the dog rested, a living prayer, a silent miracle, a final witness to a love greater than words. Late that evening, Cardinal Montini approached the tomb one last time. His steps were slow, almost hesitant. He knelt beside the dog. He gently placed a hand on the scruffy fur. He closed his eyes for a moment. "Thank you," he murmured, barely audible, but filled with infinite fervor. "Thank you for a lesson no sermon in the world could have taught better." The dog did not move, but perhaps somewhere, deep in his fading consciousness, he felt the words. He felt the hand. He sensed the love. Perhaps he understood. His mission was accomplished. Later that night, the dog closed his eyes for the last time. For eternity, there was no whimper, no tremble. He departed as he had lived, in silence, with loyalty, in love. A small movement, a final sigh, then silence. A silence heavier than any bell that had ever rung. In the morning, the priests found him, curled peacefully, his head slightly raised, as if listening to a distant voice. They gathered in silent prayer, then they carried him outside, covered with a simple white sheet. The people gathered on the piers and knelt as he passed. No words were spoken, no bells tolled, only the soft whisper of the wind, gliding through the high arches of the basilica, accompanying his final journey. They buried him in a small garden near the basilica, under an old olive tree, where the morning light touched first, where the birds sang. They found a place worthy of him. A simple stone marked the spot. It bore a single word, understated and perfect: amigo. And so, his story remained in Rome, whispered everywhere, carried by the cobblestones, passed from generation to generation. The story of a small dog, who taught that true faithfulness transcends time, and that love is stronger than death. In every heart that heard this story, a spark remained, a quiet, untamable light, never to be extinguished.